You and welcome everyone to our session today on Microsoft Excel, really kind of focusing more on the finance and accounting professions. So with that being said, Microsoft Excel, being this amazing tool that it is so full of different features that it's really hard to narrow it down. So basically what I did was I did a search in Chat, or I should say Copilot. I think I tried ChatGPT also to see what would be the most common things that would be used for these types of professions in Excel. And that's kind of really how I came up with the list of topics that we're going to be covering here today. In the handout that you have available in the chat, there's going to be the first topic called named ranges. When we talk about this feature called named ranges, it is something that I actually use in Excel every single day. It is something to help us automate different processes depending on what it is you do in Excel, but especially when it comes to formulas. So first, let me explain what they are, how to create them, and different benefits of how we can use them. So let's say that we want to create a formula that is going to calculate, and I'm on the references tab of the worksheet, the workbook. But if I wanted to create a formula that was going to take these sales figures and create a commission, and I want to be able to copy that down for all of my employees, but I want to reference a commission rate coming from an individual cell. In this case, it's G2. I could do that formula by simply saying equal F5 multiplied by G2. But with this, I wouldn't be able to copy the formula down. The reason I wouldn't is because if I complete that formula and copy it down, it moves from cell to cell, going down as I copy it. So it's moving off of G2, going to G3, G4, G5, etc. as I copy it down. It's okay for it to copy column F to go from F5 to F6 to F7 when we want to calculate this commission. But in some cases, you might think of using a dollar sign to lock the cell down so that you could copy it. So that is called an absolute reference, where I could put a dollar sign in front of the G and a dollar sign in front of the number 2. Oh, dollar sign, Jolene. A dollar sign in front of the G and a dollar sign in front of the 2. The difficulty with doing something like this is it can actually be a little confusing when someone else sees that. So if you're going to be sharing this worksheet with someone else and they look at the formula, they may be a little confused as to why the dollar signs are there. I know I was the first time I saw them. But the thing is, if I copy it down, it would lock the cell. So it would stay G2 as it copies it down. Well, that's great in some situations, but there's a different way to do it instead. We could name G2. We can go to cell G2. We can click in the name box at the top left, right underneath the ribbon at the top left there. Click in the name box, and we can physically type the name we want to give the cell. So in this case, I want to name it commission rate. So I'm going to actually type commission rate. But the thing about naming cells is you can't use any spaces in the name. I'm just going to press enter after typing that name. Now that cell is no longer referred to as G2. It's called commission rate. So you can use uppercase, lowercase, by the way, when you name a cell. And this is only one way to name a cell. We do, of course, have multiple ways because this is Microsoft. But now I could actually use it in a formula. So if I go back and recreate this formula, just to kind of say I'm starting from scratch, this is how I normally would do it. I would do equal. I would still take my F5. I would multiply it, and I'm still going to multiply it by G2. But now when I choose cell G2, it comes up with the actual name. I'm going to do Control Enter to stay on that cell. it shows me exactly the same answer. You can see in the formula bar, it says F5 multiplied by commission rate. Makes it easier to understand the formula when we see it, especially different than the dollar signs. I could copy that formula down because a named range, a named cell, automatically is an absolute reference. So we do not need the dollar signs. I can copy it down, and each one of those is going to say commission rate. Another benefit that we have is, let's say that I actually go to product search. And let's say in this product search, I want to create a formula using that commission rate. And I want it based on the quantity, column C. I'm going to do equal commission rate, or I should say quantity, I'll just say C7 as an example, multiplied by, I'm going to type CO, and when I look at the list of the functions, because once you start typing text, it assumes you want to use a function. The functions have a circle with the FX on the left-hand side. Notice that commission rate doesn't. Commission rate actually has squares because it's a named range. I'm going to double-click commission rate, Control Enter, and I get the answer taking that quantity multiplied by the commission rate back in the other worksheet. So we could use a named range in multiple sheets. Another benefit is if you are going to be creating formulas that are going to be based on the same range of information over and over again, name the range. Select the cells in that range, name them so that you don't have to keep going back and selecting those cells. Because what if you have a million rows down that you're going to be creating 6 formulas on? You don't want to have to keep going back and selecting those. Name the cells instead. So there's some guidelines for naming and some different options for you on how you can name those. But where are they actually located at? Well, if you go to the Formulas tab of the ribbon, there is a defined names group, and in that group, it has features like create from selection, use in formulas, define names. But if you want to add new or modify or delete existing named ranges, you can click Name Manager. Name Manager will always show you a list of the current named ranges in your workbook. By default, they have a scope of workbook, meaning they are available across all sheets, like I just did with that commission rate. But I'm going to close this window, this name manager, and let's say that I need to go back to the cell that's called commission rate. I could go to the name box at the top left, click the drop down arrow, and it will show me a list of the workbook named ranges. If I click commission rate, it's going to jump me back to that same worksheet to the cell that I named commission rate, just so you could see. Now, just so you know, a different way to name a cell or a range of cells would be to select the text and the cell that you want to name. So I'm going to do this for the sales goal. I'm going to do F1 and G1. I'm going to select F1 and G1. And on the Formulas tab of the ribbon, I'm going to click Create from Selection, where it automatically is recognizing that the left-hand column that I selected is the text. It's going to use that text to name cell G1. All I have to do is click OK. Now, how do I know G1 is called sales goal? Well, if I click on G1, I can see in the name box, it's sales underscore goal. The reason it added the underscore was because there was a space in the text. And since we can't have spaces, it uses the underscore. Now, how could I use that in a formula? Well, there's, starting on page 2, essential functions built into Excel for finance. We'll do an example of a PMT here in a second, but there are some everyday functions that we also use. So first, I'm going to actually just quickly demonstrate an if function. While I'm on this worksheet, I want to use the sales goal, a very common function that is used by several different types of positions people hold, but a lot when it comes to finance and accounting, is in column H. I'm going to go to H5, and I want to create a formula that's going to answer with a yes or a no to know if the total sales for each salesperson is greater than or equal to the sales goal. So I want to know yes or no if it's true or false. So we can use an if function to do that. I'm going to do equal the letter I. It shows me if. I can either double click the name if or press my tab key, and it brings up a screen tip showing you the arguments for that specific formula. So it wants to know what is the logical test and what is the value if true and what is the value if false. The logical test is that I want it to look at F5 to see if it is greater than or equal to the sales goal. Then the next argument, I'm going to put in a comma. The next argument is, what do we want the answer to be if that's true? I wanted to say the word yes. So I'm going to type yes in quotes because it's text. I don't want it to think it's a function. So you have to put text in quotes. I'm going to put in another comma so that I can answer the value if false. So if the sales goal is not met, I wanted to say no. I'm going to do quotes around the NO as well. Then I'm going to control enter, and I'll see that the first person does have their sales goal met. So it is a yes. And if I look at their total sales, I can see that it's greater than or equal to the sales goal of 6,500. I can copy that formula down because the sales goal was a named cell. It's called sales goal. We didn't use H1 in the original formula. So named ranges can come in handy with a lot of different scenarios. But let's do one of the financial functions. I'm going to go to the worksheet called real estate. And on this real estate, it's using a financial model. We're going to see how a PMT function can actually be used to calculate a monthly payment. So if we're going to be selling homes, somebody's going to want to know, if I have this interest rate, pay it back in this amount of periods, and I buy a house for this amount, how much per month am I going to be paying back? So right now I have it at 4.5%, 30 months to pay it back at a $1 million property that I'm going to be buying. And I need to know for my client what it would be the monthly payment. Well, there are several finance functions that are built into Excel. If you look at the formulas tab of the ribbon, there's this function library group. In that library group, you'll find the category financial. When you click on that, you will see several formulas related to working in finance. Now, some of these I do use on a pretty regular basis. PMT is one of the most common. According to Microsoft survey, it is the #1 financial function used. I don't know if I agree with that. I'm not in accounting or finance right now, but just so you know, that's what Microsoft states. But you can see when you hesitate on the names of these functions, it's giving you a screen tip, and it's also giving you the tell me more. If you want to find out more information about any of these functions, simply click tell me more. It will open the pane on the right-hand side for help, where you can then dive into different functions to get help on. It will give you a breakdown of the syntax of the formula. Each of the arguments will be covered, etc. So that would be one way that you could actually figure it out. But let me give you another. Let's say that on cell B10, I decided that I know the function that I want to start with. Sometimes when you start a formula, it's hard to kind of look at that little screen tip that we get and determine what would be the, arguments that I need to enter in. Sometimes we don't always know that. Okay, so now my Excel is kind of being weird on me. Sorry about that. But I'm going to be on cell B10. That's where I want to put the answer to the formula. I'm going to actually start with equal, the letter P, then an M, letter P and then an M, and I'm going to double click on PMT. That shows me the arguments that are required and the ones that are optional. When I look at the screen tip, I can see that rate comes first, and then the number, basically the number of months, and then the present value. Optional is the future value and the type. If I look at that and I'm not quite sure what to do, you can actually click FX in the formula icons area or from the formulas tab of the ribbon. When you click FX, it opens the function arguments window where it will walk you through each of the different arguments for the formula. You can see a description in the middle where right now it says is the interest rate. So the rate is the interest rate per period for the loan. So I want to use B4. Cell B4 is going to give us the interest rate, but I want that divided by 12. Then the number of monthly payments is going to be B6. The present value is going to be B8. That's the loan amount right now. I don't need any of the other arguments. They are optional. And I can already see what my answer is going to be. So I would be paying back over $35,000 each month for 30 years. Or 30 payments, I should say. If I click OK, it automatically shows the payback amount. So it's a negative basically because you're paying it back. Now, of course, if that person decides I only want a $500,000 house, we can be updating the amount for the present value and it will automatically update the formula. So this is something that could definitely be used, and this can be used for a lot of different industries. So just to give you an example, there is a description of a couple of what Microsoft points out as being the most common listed for you on page 2 there. But then it does walk you through that PMT function. But beyond that, Microsoft is actually based on the information that I have looked up, there's a lot of other functions that are outside of that finance category that can be used for a lot of different analysis. But do I always start from scratch, creating a brand new workbook for things that I need to do? No, I don't, because sometimes I use a template. Built into Excel, you will find several finance and accounting type templates that you could get started with. So if you go to the file menu at the top left, go to the new category on the left-hand side, you're going to see here's some recent ones that I've used at the top, but down below as I start scrolling through, I can see some of them. Like here's an expense report, a basic one. I can see a timesheet. I can see a general ledger with a budget. If I want to search for something, I of course have the search at the top that I could use, but let's say that I want to see this general ledger. If I click that, it's going to give me a bigger preview of it, and on the right-hand side, it gives me a description. So instead of me having to start from scratch, because I may not have good tracking methods in my accounting system, or whatever your case might be. We don't always have those tools depending on your organization and what software programs you have. Sometimes I do this analysis just in Excel. Easy to share with other people as well. I'm going to click create just so you can see what this ends up giving you. It's actually pre-created with an actual versus the budget year to date. It's got different sheets down at the bottom, which are all color coded. But you can see as I click on each of the sheets, it also has buttons at the top that we can click on to navigate to go previous to next on the sheets. So why would I want to start from scratch when I could really just be using one of these templates? And this has a dashboard look on it. It's got some filters going on with it's actually using slicers. So if I want to see specific people, whatever the case might be, I have a lot of automation that is built into this, and I don't have to start from scratch. If I go to this monthly expense summary, maybe I want to see based on sponsorships. It automatically has filtered my list just by me clicking on sponsorships. So if I need to see how much did we spend on, or what my GL account number, my code is for supplies, it's 5,000. I just click marketing and it tells me it's 10,000 is my GL code. So you can see that it automatically has built-in options. Why would I want to start from scratch? So my recommendation is go to the new, from the file menu, go to new, do a search for whatever it is that you're looking for. See if there's something already built that you might want to start with. You can always tweak it for your own needs, but why start from scratch? I own a small business and I didn't start from scratch with any of mine. My invoice, my sales quotes, all of the templates that I use started from the Excel templates. I just added my logo, my company information, etc. And I use them over and over again. And I've been using, basically, some of them I've been using for 15, 20 years. Actually, it's been 20 years. More than 20 years probably. So anyway, just so you know that it does have these templates built in. Now, I'm not going to use this anymore. I'm going to go ahead and close it, and I'm not going to save it. That's kind of the best part about looking at these templates is you don't have to keep it if you don't want to, but it's a great way to kind of see what is out there that could be helping you. But let's continue with a couple of other functions, more commonly used functions when it comes to finance and accounting. On page 4, it talks about a function called the sum if. The sum if allows us to create a formula that would add together a range of cells, but only if the cells match a specific criteria. I just went to the employee departments worksheet, and here's a list of the employees with their ID number, their department, their date of hire, etc. And what I need to find out is what on G2 is where I'm going to put this formula. On G2, I kind of have sum if, count if, and average if laid out just to make this a little bit easier. But what I want to do is I want to add together all of the salaries, but only for the people that are in marketing. So I want to sum the salary column, but only if the department says marketing. I'm going to start out with equal SU, and I'm going to double click the word sum if. What it's looking for first is what is the range we want to evaluate. That's going to be the department. So I'm going to select C6 all the way down to the end of that column. Now, of course, I'm selecting it. I should have named that range, which I'll show you in a second. But once I have that part, I can put in a comma, and it wants to know what is the criteria. Well, the criteria is going to be the word marketing, but it has to be in quotes because it is text. It's not case sensitive, so I don't have to capitalize the M, even though in the department column it is capitalized. But once I have marketing, I can put in a comma, and then the optional is the sum range. So what is the range of cells that I actually want to add together? That's the salary. So I'm going to start on F6, and I'm going to select all the way down through row 52. Then I'm going to control enter, and it automatically shows me all of the salaries for everybody that's in the marketing department. Now, I want to do a couple of other formulas using those same ranges of cells. As a matter of fact, what if I end up doing formulas on all of this? I could actually select this entire range, use the headings up in row 5 to name each of these columns. By going to the Formulas tab, clicking on Create from Selection, I want it to use the top row to name each of these individual columns. I'm going to click OK, and now each of these columns is a named range. I'm going to use them in a formula to do a count if. So what I want to do on H2 is I want to count how many people are in the marketing department. So how many people are making up that sum if formula that I just did? I'm going to use a function called count if. I'm going to do equal COU. I'm going to double click count if, because I only want it to count the cells in a range if it matches my criteria. The range I want it to look at is the department. If I type DE, I can double click department and it references that range of cells in column C. I don't have to keep selecting it. And then it's a comma and then the criteria. The criteria is going to be marketing again. So I'm saying I want you to count the cells in that department column that say marketing. So there's only 4 people that are in the marketing department. So the answer comes back as 4. Another option that we have is, what if I want to know what is the average salary for every person in marketing? I want to know the average salary of everybody in marketing. I can use a function on cell I2 that's going to be an average if. These are very common if functions that we have available. So when it comes to this function, it works just like the sum if. Basically the same arguments are going to be used, but now I have them as named ranges, but the answer is going to give me an average instead of a sum. I'm going to do equal AV, then I'm going to double click average if. It's looking for the same things as we saw with the sum if. First, it wants to know what is the range. The range is going to be the department. So I'm using the named range, comma, the criteria is going to be marketing. And once again, that has to be in quotes. And then the range that I want to get the average of is going to be the salary. So as soon as I start typing salary, I can select that named range from the drop-down list. Then I can control enter, and I will see the average of all of the salaries for the employees in the marketing department. So we get a lot of great ways to use named ranges while we're doing these formulas. It's a lot easier to understand the count if and the average if instead of the sum if, because the sum if is using the cell ranges. So it makes more sense to use named ranges instead of the range names themselves. So instead of C6 through C52 and F6 through F52, if I look at these other ones using department and salary, it just makes a lot more sense. So highly recommend using those named ranges. So each of these functions that we just demonstrated are on page 4 with some more examples of using a sum if, then a count if, and then the average if. But also what's going to be included on page 6 is starting to talk about lookup functions. Lookup functions are extremely common, especially in finance and accounting, because we need to look up information to confirm values or whatever the case might be. And an example of doing a lookup is we could use a VLOOKUP. VLOOKUP function automatically looks vertical, going across columns to find information based on a record within a row. So in one case, let's say that I want to, in cell B2, I want to look up an employee based on the employee ID number. Now I'm just going to copy an employee ID number just so you can see. I don't want to type it, so I just copied it. And what I want to do is find the person's last name, their first name, and their department based on that employee ID. So somebody calls up and they say, hey, I need to know who this person is. I found their ID badge, whatever. We can look up their ID badge and find out who that person is or whatever it is you need to look up. It doesn't have to be employee information. It can be inventory. It can be financial figures. It can be your expenses. Whatever the case might be, it's whatever data you have can be looked up. So I want to go to C2. And I'm going to first do a VLOOKUP. I'm going to say equal V, And then I'm going to double click VLOOKUP. And basically what this formula is looking for is first it wants to know what is the lookup value. I'm going to click B2. I want it to look for this employee ID, comma, it wants to know what is the table array. Table array really just means what is the range of cells that it's going to find the employee ID and find the answer out of. So that's this employee information. I'm going to select, starting on B6, I'm going to go all the way across to column I and all the way down through row 47. Well, 47 numbers, row 52. So this is the range I want it to look in. With a VLOOKUP, the first range or the first cell column that we select has to be the lookup value that is required. So I started with column B, not column A, because I'm looking up the employee ID number. I'm going to put in a comma because the next argument is it wants to know the column index number. Basically, what that means is which column is going to give me the answer I'm looking for. So starting in column B, I need to count the columns across to the one I want the answer from, which is last name. I can do employee ID, department, data hire, degree, salary. Last name is the sixth column across. So if I put in a 6, do Control Enter, it automatically finds the last name for that employee ID. Now, if I want it to find the first name, I can do another formula using the VLOOKUP, and it would automatically, I could tell it to look at the 7th column across, doing a VLOOKUP. But there is an alternative. The alternative, which came out just in the past, how long has it been now? Year? Little over a year, maybe a couple years. We have a new lookup function that I don't even use the VLOOKUP anymore. I strictly use the XLOOKUP. An XLOOKUP can look vertically or horizontally. So I don't have to use a VLOOKUP to look vertical. I don't have to use an HLOOKUP to look horizontally. A XLOOKUP can do either. Plus, it has additional arguments in it. When it comes to doing approximants, by default, an approximant with an HLOOKUP or a VLOOKUP is only going to look to the next lowest value. With an XLOOKUP, we can say look to the next highest value. So it definitely has some extra benefits that we didn't get with using a VLOOKUP or an HLOOKUP. It's much easier. And it also has built-in error coding. Let me show you with just a few examples on the first name by doing an XLOOKUP. I'm going to do equal X, double click on XLOOKUP. It wants to know what is the lookup value, just like the VLOOKUP. I'm going to click B2. Comma, it wants to know what is the lookup array. It doesn't have to be the first column of the table array. It can be any column, because what if I wanted to look up the last name to find out the date they were hired and get their first name? We could do that. It doesn't have to be the first column of the table array because we don't do a table array. We do individual columns. So I need the employee ID column. So I'm going to, since that's a named range, I'm going to type E and I get employee ID. So it's going to find my lookup value in the employee ID column, comma, instead of having to count columns across to find which one is going to give me the answer, I use the name of the range for that column. I want the answer to come from first name. So I'm going to type FI, and I'm going to double click on the named range called first name. So basically I'm saying, look up this employee ID number out of this column and give me the answer out of this column. I'm going to Control Enter, and it automatically finds the first name of the person. Now, there were optional arguments that came after that. I'll give you an example of one of those as I do the department. But the XLOOKUP does have a lot of advantages. I did give you quite a few. I think there's like 3 different examples on page 7, 8, 2 different examples, I guess. But you can, of course, find lots of those in the help or by going to the internet as well. But let me give you one more demonstration on this XLOOKUP with this data. And I want to find the department, but I'm also going to do a built-in error code. So if the employee ID number that we're looking up is not available in that list, I want it to tell me that. So I want it to say invalid employee ID or whatever the case would be. But I want to find the department name that matches this employee. So I'm going to do equal X, double click XLOOKUP. Then I'm going to say I want to look up B2, comma. My lookup array is going to be that employee ID column, comma. The range that's going to give me the answer is going to be the department, which once again is a named range, so I'm using that. But then I'm going to do another comma because the next argument is called if not found. It's optional. But if I do a comma, it will take me to add in if not found. I'm going to put in a quote. So I have my first quote, and then I'm going to say employee ID not found and close it off with another quote. I'm going to control enter, and it automatically finds the department sales for this particular employee. But because I built in that error code, what happens if the employee ID number is inaccurate? If I have an inaccurate employee ID number, it will automatically give me an NA if it is not found on a generic level, but the department is actually telling me, and I'm going to take out some of this and put in just so you could see, if somebody enters in a totally off the wall one, it's not going to find it. So if it's not valid, I want it to say employee ID not found. I don't have to nest another function in with it. Makes it so much easier. So much easier. So we have a lot of great tools that we can use to really be able to narrow down exactly what it is that we're looking for. Now, just so everybody is aware, there's always multiple ways to find the same things, like that sum if. I want to give you an alternative to that sum if. We could actually, I'm going to go to G3, and I'm going to do a subtotal function. I'm going to do equal subtotal. At the bottom of page 8, going to page 9, it talks about this function. And basically what it's referring to is we have a list of different functions that we can use to do a subtotal. I'm going to choose sum, which is number 9. 9 is a hidden code to the computer. And I want it to give me a sum of all of the salaries. So I'm going to use that named range for salary. I'm going to control enter, and it gives me the total of all the salaries. But what if I only want to see if the department is marketing? I can go to this list and filter it. By going to my data tab, I can click my filter icon. It will give me drop-down arrows for each of my column headings. I can go to department, click on that drop-down, and uncheck the select all and choose marketing and click OK. The subtotal will automatically just add based on the criteria of the filter. So I get the same answer as the sum if. So if my criteria is going to change, I can filter based on that criteria to make it easier. Just so you know, you could do that. Great option to have. I like the subtotal, but the sum if does work just as well. Okay. But there is another topic that I want to discuss before we run out of time today. So I'm going to skip over a couple of the extra things that I have in the handout and go to the topic for pivot tables. Very common to be using pivot tables in finance and accounting fields. We're going to go to the worksheet called Subtotal Pivot. And in this worksheet, what I want to do, I'm just going to kind of scroll back up to the top here, is I have a list of company orders. So these are orders that have been placed by customers. And basically what I want to do is create a pivot table that is going to help me summarize this data. It isn't summarized right now, and I'm going to be needing to change my mind all the time because I need to only see certain products, how they're doing, and which salespeople made the sale, and different information like that. So I want to turn this range of cells into a pivot table. By going to the Insert tab of the ribbon, excuse me, I'm going to click on the icon for Pivot Table. It selects my range of cells for all of my records, and it's going to automatically put the pivot table on a new sheet. I'm simply going to click OK. From here, it gives me a new sheet, and on the right-hand side is where I actually build the pivot table from. On the right-hand side, I can see a list of the column names that were going across the top of that data. And let's say that I need to see the company name and then the salesperson that sold something to that company. Immediately when I click those two names of those fields, those columns, it adds those to row A. I should say column A, going down in rows, where I clicked the name of the company first, so I can see the name of the company, and then indented underneath it is the name of every salesperson that actually sold something to that company. But how much did they sell to each of these companies? If I go to the right-hand side and click Extended Price, it adds a column B. Column B is going to be the subtotals of everything, the total orders for every salesperson for Around the Horn is on B4, but individually per salesperson is the subtotal, and Dodsworth, Janet's, Laura's, etc. going down. Could I have done this back in the regular worksheet? Yes and no. It would have been extremely difficult to manually do this, but how long did that actually take me to get this detail? A couple of seconds, a couple of clicks is really all it takes to generate that data. But let's take this a step further. What if I only want to see companies that are in a specific country? And maybe I only want to see specific salespeople. We can filter a pivot table. We can filter a pivot table similar to filtering a regular Excel spreadsheet, but here in pivot tables, we have better choices. By going to the Pivot Table Analyze tab of the ribbon, we have this filter group, and I'm going to use both a insert slicer and I'm going to insert a timeline. First, I'm going to insert a slicer, and these are going to be the fields I want to filter by. Which columns do I want to filter by? I want to filter by country and salesperson. So I'm going to check those and click OK. I will get individual boxes, little windows here, for each of the fields I wanted to add in. But how do they work? What if I only want to see the orders for companies in Canada? All I have to do is go to the country slicer, click Canada. And now I'm seeing the names of the companies coming from Canada. It's not showing any other companies. If I need to see, what if I need to see, let me scroll down here. What if I need to see Norway? I click Norway and it shows me the companies that are part of Norway. So it's a super easy way to be able to filter this data. And what if I only want to see a specific salesperson? Let's say that I cleared the slicer filter by going to the top right of the country slicer window. I want to bring back all of the countries again because I really only want to see based on a specific salesperson. I don't want to see every salesperson. Let's say I want to see Robert King. If I click the name Robert King in that salesperson, it automatically shows me just the orders for Robert King. Now, of course, I could have a separate pivot table on the same sheet to analyze different data, all depending on what it is you need to see. But today is more of an introduction as to how can we easily limit what we're seeing on our screen. By using a regular filter in a regular worksheet, it's a lot more difficult. Here we are saying I only want to see these columns of data, and I only want to see based on this criteria. I'm going to go to the top right of the salesperson slicer window. I'm going to click the clear filter, and it brings back all of the records of information again. I'm going to add one more filter option because I want to filter by dates. So I'm going to go back to the pivot table. I'm going to click on any cell inside the pivot table so that it brings back the pivot table analyze tab of the ribbon. Otherwise, when I'm selected on a slicer, I have a slicer tab on the ribbon, which does give me some formatting options and different things like that. But I'm going to click on the pivot table anywhere on the pivot table so that I have the pivot table analyze tab again. From there, I'm going to go back to the filters and I'm going to click insert timeline. Timelines only look at date fields. I'm going to choose order date and click OK. Now I have another way to filter the pivot table. I could click and drag and move this one anywhere I want it to be as well. But what you're seeing is a scroll bar across the bottom. As I scroll left and right, I can see the years, which this is a little bit older of data, but it's 2017 when I scroll to the left. And if I want to see orders that were placed in February of that year, I can click on the blue bar under February, and it filters to only show the total orders for the ones that were placed in the month of February. If I want to see the timeline based on quarters, because maybe I want first quarter of 2017, I could go to the right-hand side, click months, choose quarters, because I have years, quarters, months, and days. Now I can see that if I want to see quarter one, I can click quarter one. But if I want to see orders from quarter three, I click quarter three and it instantly filters. That would be a lot more difficult back in a regular worksheet, especially we only wanted to see the names of the companies and the salespeople. So super easy to be able to do that by using a pivot table and using slicers and timelines. But a lot of times I want to see a chart to go along with my data in my pivot table. I'm going to click back on the pivot table again, and I'm going to go back to the tab on the ribbon called Pivot Table Analyze. And on the right-hand side in the Tools group, I'm going to click the icon Pivot Chart. A pivot chart is directly connected to the pivot table. So whatever we show in the pivot table will be displayed also in the visual of the chart. I just need to choose my chart type. I'll leave it on column. I'm going to click OK. It will give you a chart in the middle of your worksheet where, of course, you can click and drag and move it wherever you want to go. But as you filter your data, like let's say I want to go back and see only the orders from quarter three that were placed in companies in Canada. I click Canada from my countries, and I can see based on my quarter three, my chart is automatically updated, and so is my pivot table. So the slicers and the timelines are going to work for both of those objects at the same time. If I go back and say I want to see Austria, and I only want to see quarter one, and I only want to see a specific salesperson, I could filter by all of those if I chose to. At the top right corner of each of those slicer or timeline windows, you will find the clear filter where it can always bring back all of the detail. Right now, I'm just looking at orders for Austria, for the two salespeople that sold products, and that is Andrew and Robert, are the only ones that sold anything. But if I wanted to see an individual person based on a quarter, based on a country, I can do that by filtering with all three of those. It's a matter of selecting what it is you want to see. Once again, of course, you can always clear your filters by going to the top right of each of the slicers or timelines so that you have the ability to be able to go back and see all of your records again. Now, of course, my pivot table is pretty squished. I should say my pivot chart is pretty squished because I'm displaying too much data. But what if I changed my mind and I don't need to see the name of the country? Or the name of the company, I should say, the name of the company. I could go back to my pivot table, go to the right-hand side, uncheck company name, and it removes it. Instead, maybe I need to see the product that was sold by each salesperson. Now my pivot table is displaying the name of the salesperson, and then indented under it is the name of all the products they sold. And then I'm getting a subtotal for each of those products in column B. Now, of course, I can't see who bought the product, but I could always add that in by going back and saying company name. So I can see that Andrew Fuller sold Alice Mutton to these companies. And I can see the subtotal of all of that. So great ways to be able to really limit what it is that you're seeing. So pivot tables and pivot charts did start in your handout on page 10 and go to the end of the worksheet with the visualizing data in charts.